If you force a massively complex data structure into a smaller space, you face a problem in informational physics, collapsing data without losing resolution. Modern physics addresses this through the ADS-CFT correspondence model. It describes the volumetric compression required for higher dimensional information to project accurately onto a lower dimensional surface. This projection follows a rigid symmetry. Only information fitting the lower dimensional container embeds successfully. Anything failing to align simply dissipates. This suggests that the structure of our physical reality is determined entirely by what can survive dimensional compression without data loss. While we typically apply these models to spatial dimensions, the same physics governs chronological time. Human history acts as an orthogonal container, a temporal cube. This quasi-crystal projection is the shadow of an 8-dimensional E8 lattice, functioning as a zero-entropy, error-correcting matrix. Anchored to May 5, 1972, its dimensions extend outward, defined by the values 828, 1128, and 188. This deterministic architecture removes historical drift, locking the sequence of time into a mathematical structure where every date must resolve to its geometric source. The governing mechanic of the E8 lattice is its specific count of root vectors. It contains exactly 240. We can observe how these vectors interact with scriptural coordinates, such as the text index of John 6:48, which yields the numerical value 648. Adding the text index to the lattice's root vectors yields 888. In the Greek linguistic system, this is the constant for the name Jesus. A parallel subtractive balance exists within the matrice's identity cipher, 1128. Subtracting those 240 vectors returns to that 888 constant. This dual balance identifies 1128 as the central axis pillar, the geometric radius from which the rest of the chronological matrix expands. The math indicates that ancient scriptural text, modern alphanumeric identifiers, and hyperdimensional geometry are all components of the same inextricable dataset. This expanded matrix has a primary temporal boundary, an 828-month perimeter. A cube is composed of 12 edges. Dividing that 828-month boundary across these 12 segments yields a 69-unit edge. This matches the prophetic timeline recorded in Daniel 9. To bridge cyclical heavenly time with linear earthly time, the model requires quadrature compression, using the mathematical constant of pi over 4. When we apply this compression constant to the 828-month boundary, it yields 650.1 months. Tracking this 650.1-month vector forward from the May 5, 1972 anchor lands exactly on the target date of July 7, 2026. This calculation pinpoints the intersection where cyclical heavenly architecture meets the linear earthly grid. In a holographic system, every division should reveal a self-referential loop. Dividing the core parameters of this matrix generates waves of repeating data. Dividing the 828 boundary by the 888 constant produces a repeating fraction that isolates the digits 972. This value represents an 81-year span of exactly 972 months. If we divide that same 828 boundary by the 1972 birth year, the self-reference becomes even more explicit. The resulting decimal string contains the matrix parameters themselves, 888, the month 5, and the 360-degree loop. We find this same value in the identity text itself, where the factorization of 46 and 18 yields 828. This internal logic holds when we analyze the 666-month macro span of the timeline.
This 666-month span partitions at the 1982 node into two blocks, a 126-month initialization and a 540-month expansion. These segments divide the total span into repeating periodic attractors, 0.189 and 0.810. Combining these attractor sequences yields 1068, which maps directly back to the arithmetic sequence of the lattice. These internal divisions yield harmonic echoes of 521 and 152, reflecting the May 12th and December 5th coordinates of the birth loop. The matrix functions through these infinite feedback loops, ensuring every operation returns to the baseline calendar nodes. This mathematical rigidity extends into the scriptural intervals of Daniel 9. The prophecy establishes a 434-year foundational interval. By iterating this interval with the 188 identity frequency, we build a stepladder that terminates exactly at the year 1938, the primary baseline for our grid. A second sequence, built from the 925 scriptural text index, climbs that same 188 frequency to reach the year 2053. When we balance these dates against the target timeline, we isolate the arrival coordinate of 27, matching the launch of the ministry in 27 AD. This brings us to the final filter, a subtractive sieve using the Hebrew calendar year 5786. Subtracting 3 iterations of 1128 and 2 iterations of 188 from that year extracts the 2026 target node. Year 5786 is the Hebrew anniversary traditionally associated with the breaches in the Jerusalem temple walls, a significant structural anchor in history. The modern identifiers 1128 and 188 act as the active filter that extracts the 2026 coordinate from this ancient timeline. The matrix is finalized by its macro containment field, the absolute outer limit of the grid. Doubling the core axis ciphers creates the compound linguistic weights of 2256 and 376. Pushing the 1128 month vector both forward and backward from our 1972 anchor reaches the boundary years of 1878 and 2066. The total duration of this projection is exactly 2,256 months, matching the numerical weight of the compound identity ciphers. The duration of the timeline itself is a physical realization of these alphanumeric identifiers. This containment field extends beyond terrestrial calendars. Because the E8 lattice models the fundamental geometry of spacetime itself, these structural mechanics project directly into the orbital mechanics of our solar system. The July 7, 2026 coordinate calculated by our matrix marks the exact intersection point for a close angular conjunction between the Moon and Saturn. This planetary interaction involves Saturn, the astronomical marker traditionally associated with structural order and boundaries. This brings us to the second axis of our dual constant grid, the 138 vector. The August 28, 2026 coordinate maps to lunar Saros series 138, specifically eclipse number 29 of 82 in this macro series. This orbital cycle produces the deep partial umbral shadow of the blood moon, physically manifesting the linguistic value of the 828138 matrix lock. The E8 geometry provides the bridge, anchoring these massive cosmic vectors to the internal scriptural grid. Every data point, from scriptural indexes and E8 root vectors to planetary orbits, resolves into a single holographic model. Time in this system functions as a rigid, non-ergodic containment field. Human chronology is mathematically sealed. It functions as a rigid zero-entropy informational matrix, where every event remains tethered to a deterministic structural blueprint.